All right, we're back.
Hi, everyone. It's been a minute.
Holy crap, we're back.
Yeah, we've been going through a bit of a transition period on the podcast and kind of figuring out what we want to be. And Chris has decided to be a guest
Yep,
moving forward for the time being, and he'll be back. Definitely, Josh will be back as well.
Max will be back,
Yeah,
and many other future guests we'll have. And so for the time being, it's just good old Patrick and I,
yep.
two kung fu brethren, doing this thing.
And don't worry, guys, we're still going to bring the fate your way and keep things potent and relevant and juicy.
Yeah, and
for you.
hopefully we'll be able to do this on a more consistent basis, which will
Mhm.
help ultimately with what we're trying to do with the cast in general.
Yeah, because we want to share our ideas more with all of you and see what this can grow into.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
So for today, since we are kind of changing things up and we
Mhm.
have a little smaller of a group this time,
Mm-hmm.
something that Patrick and I both have near and dear to our hearts is martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
and something that has impacted us greatly in our lives. And so we're going to go ahead and dedicate this cast to our martial arts practice. And we're going to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
Patrick, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I, you know, maybe it was like this for you, but my intro into the martial arts world was my dad was taking me to stay with him at a hotel. My growing up, my parents were separated, so my dad would come and visit me on the weekends, a couple times a month, and we'd stay at a hotel, and we'd always watch, pay-per-view, if you guys remember that, pay-per-view movies, and
They still do that.
yeah,
It's more
that's
for
still a
like
thing.
it's more
Still a
for like
thing.
UFC fights and stuff.
Yeah,
but-
yeah. And I remember my dad scrolling down the list one time and I saw Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and just the name piqued my interest. And I was like, that one, I want that one, Dad. He was like, all right, sure, whatever you want. And, I'd never seen a movie like that before in my life. And, immediately I was like, I want to do that. I want to run on walls and do kung fu
backflip and
wield
fight
a
with
sword,
swords,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think something about the serendipity of that weekend, my dad had just gotten me like a ninja Lego set too. So I was really steeped in the vibes of it. And
How old were you?
I was probably like 7 or 8.
Okay.
I want to say. And from then on, it took me a while to start taking martial arts classes. But that was my intro into the interest of it all. And I didn't know what I wanted yet. I had a friend or two some were doing karate, some were doing taekwondo. But that was my
Entry
intro.
point.
Yeah. How about
Cool.
you?
For me, I think this is fairly common. So I don't think it's like a really special intro into it. I was always obsessed with like ninjas. So one of my favorite TV show, cartoon play thing when I was little was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was I was in that era. I was born in 85, so grew up in like the late 80s, early 90s. So 4 or 5 years old, I'm playing with TMNT, like hardcore. There was also a movie series called Three Ninjas, which I don't know if you remember. That deep cut. I know I'm a little bit older than you.
It's a deep cut.
It's a deep cut. So for all those out there who watch Three Ninjas, you know what's up. And it was just this era of like Karate Kid and definitely Crouching Tiger came out. Like that's more. And then you have Jackie Chan and you have
like Rush Hour.
Yeah, all those movies.
What about Bruce Lee?
I was going to just say, and then Bruce Lee, like the
classics.
The reason why he brought so much of what we associate with modern day martial arts in movies to the United States. Like if it wasn't for him being such a huge star
and such a personality too, on and off the screen,
huge personality. So I was definitely interested. I was every Halloween, for a lot of Halloweens, I was like go as like a ninja or something, martial arty themed. And so I was always really obsessed with that. And I always was interested in that idea of training in some sort of martial art. And then I think I was around, I want to say like 11, maybe 10. And I started training. I took like a couple classes in Taekwondo. And it wasn't for me. The whole gi thing, and it was
only kicking,
only drills, like just these like types of drills over and over again. And I'm like, I don't know if this is for me. And then I think I was like 12 or 13. I tried Aikido. I really liked it. I thought it was cool, but again, very gi, very ceremonial. And it was just like when you first start training in Aikido, there's a lot of just rolling. So you're just like rolling your back, and then roll to stand
getting
up,
used to the contact,
and just like rolling and rolling and rolling. And it was a little too passive, I would say, for me. It's very like judo, and like where you're redirecting force, using your opponent's energy against them, kind of mentality. And it felt a little passive for me. And so again, there's a growing pain with any martial art. When you first start training, you got to kind of cut your teeth a little bit, earn your stripes, literally earn your stripes on belts. And so it was part of that where I was like, had a hard time dealing with that aspect of it. And I just didn't feel like I found the right art or, in my opinion, the right teacher.
So neither of those things were clicking for you.
They weren't resonating. So I'm like, I knew that it was like cool. Like I was learning like little arm locks and stuff. I'm like, okay, this is cool.
You knew your entry was there somewhere.
Yeah. So it was like this exploratory period between the ages of like 10 and 15. Where I was really just trying out different styles and things weren't really clicking. And then when I was around 15, my mom actually met Steven, who is our current teacher, both our mutual teacher. And the person we've been working with, I've been working with him for over 24 years now. But she met him, he was sharing a rental space in North Boulder, off of, I think, Broadway and what's that cross street? It's over by like Lucky's Market. Or not Lucky's, Ideal.
Yeah, Alpine.
Yeah. So he had a little space over there, and he was sharing it with like a yoga studio and like massage therapist. It was like one of those kind of like holistic center type vibes. And so he was running his classes out of there, and he was training with the rings, like the Shaolin rings. And my mom saw him practicing and was like, oh, who's this guy? So she walked up to him and was like, hey, my son's really interested in trying to find martial arts. Do you teach? And he's like, yes, I do. And
your mom was looking out for you.
100%, always has, always will continue to be. And so I went in and met with Steven, and it was just like, boom. Like it was just pure full alignment. And I just became dedicated. I wanted to like shave my head, put on ceremonial robes, and just like walk the walk, and so that's where it really clicked for me. But it started really young. It started like, again, I 5, 6, 7, just being obsessed with it. And then 10, starting to try to find my own entryway into it. And I think that that's something that I would recommend for people if they've either experienced it and didn't really like it, or haven't really been exposed to a lot of different types, because especially with the UFC, everything's been like whittled down to like Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu, or bespoke like Shotokan karate or Taekwondo. And the mixed martial arts age has kind of changed a lot of that. But figure out, like, try different styles, and it's different.
Such a fun time when you're young. Like, ooh, maybe I want to try a little Muay Thai. Maybe I want to try Jiu-Jitsu. Oh, neither of those are really working for me. Let me look at a different part of the world with very different martial arts, like Krav Maga and Israel.
Our Filipino martial art too, like with Kali. Like you have all of these different weapons training. You have, hand-to-hand training. You have all these different styles, and just like there's a multitude of infinite amount of personality types of being in the world, like there are different martial art types that are going to align with other people more so. But I would say that's how it really started for me.
Beautiful.
It's like obsession with ninjas and like TMNT.
How could you not?
And then just trying to find the art form that really aligned with me. And the thing about our martial art that we practice, the background of it is called Centerline Martial Arts, is what it used to be known as, our school. Before then, just as a fun aside, it used to be known as Kick and Stick. There was a flyer that I had from back in the day that had changed recently to Centerline Martial Arts.
Nice.
When I first came on board, but I had a flyer. I still have it somewhere.
That's amazing.
Kick and Stick. And
I'm wow.
Basically what we do. But our background, just for the listeners out there, is a culmination of 4 disciplines, really. It's Muay Thai, kickboxing, Pikiti Tersha, Kali, Wing Chun Kung Fu, or Wing Chun, depending on who you talk to, and Qigong, meditation.
And Qigong would be the energetic container for everything we're doing, to really hold the energy that's generated in combat training, and being able to anchor it all in for learning and embodiment and longevity too.
Absolutely. And the school's current name is Martial Works. And that has been that way for a decade or plus at this point. Probably almost 2 decades, I would say. But and Stephen Joffe, shout out obviously to our Sifu. He's amazing.
We love our teacher.
A Boulder staple. people who are in Boulder, Colorado, probably have heard the name. He has his
infamy.
Yeah, he's influenced a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Ian, did you ever have times on your younger martial arts path where you had to take a break, or you just had a pause because you had to kind of refine yourself a little bit in between phases?
Yeah, I would say I've definitely taken breaks, and it's the same thing that happened with me at music as well. Is I play piano, and I self-taught when I was about 18.
Wow.
And I took about 2 years off in that time period because, very similarly, I was just
the feel pressure. A little burnt out.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of like the pressure, the dedication to something so young, and you're like, I don't want to have this thing that I'm beholden to right now, and I really need some space to just kind of
explore. And,
and I think that there's an aspect of it too. When you're younger, you're kind of being led a lot of places by your parents or teachers, where you are not the genesis of the thing. Like, you're going to take your kid to swimming lesson. You're going to take your kid to play soccer. You're going to take your kid to play piano. You're going to take your kid to taekwondo practice. And so you have a bunch of things that you're doing and activities. And I think that's natural. And I think that's necessary, because you're needing to be exposed to the plethora of possible interests and hobbies and
socialization
and practice and discipline and all these things. So I think it's really good to have that exposure. However, I also think that you do get to a certain point in like your early teens or mid-teens, if you're doing that since you were like 8 to 10, where you want that autonomy to make that decision for yourself.
Yeah.
To make that a declarative moment where you're like, I'm the one who's deciding to play piano. It's not because my mom is telling me I need to play piano.
Right.
Like, I'm the one who's going to martial arts because I'm not being dragged there by my dad.
Especially when you're that age, in your teenage years, identity is such a centerpiece of your blossoming as a person. Like, you need to feel like you're in charge of where your life is going to a certain degree, like you said, and claiming new aspects of yourself.
It's yours.
Yeah.
And it's like, to you. And to a certain degree, you have to have good guidance and teachers and these things along the way to help you along that path. And hopefully, if you do find good teachers, they're inspiring that aspect of self-discovery, of self-knowledge, of self-wisdom, as opposed to the indoctrination aspect of like, this is our Bible, this is what we believe, and just telling you what you need to believe versus helping you discover your truth. Like, there's a lot of schools of martial arts, especially, and schools in general, that say like, this is the truth, just follow this lineage, as opposed to, here is what we have found to be true. See what fits and what doesn't. And one of the quotes from our teacher that he says all the time is, I can only show you my kung fu, you have to find your kung fu. And it's something that comes later, I think, in the development for a martial artist as a practitioner, is you do need that rote memorization, skill-based, practiced discipline.
I loved when I first began with Stephen being immersed in a brand new lineage and the forms and the way of doing things. The history as well is beautiful, and being able to just really dive into that before training with you all. We have a small group in our class, about 12 core members of the school, maybe 11 at this point, and people come and go over the years, but I've really liked having a small group because it feels more like a family. And I think that lends itself to discovering more about yourself.
Yes.
And being able to trust the people that you're training with. And I love getting to that point where you're training by yourself and you're like, ooh, no, that didn't feel right. Even though I did the form correctly, the energy that I'm embodying doesn't actually feel powerful. What can I do to re-examine that based on my time with you and the other students and with Sifu, and starting to Sifu yourself?
Yeah, there's the self-discovery aspect of it in exchange, energetic exchange with different people. So in my background of training, I've also done extensive training in Muay Thai, specifically with one of Steven's really close friends and also student, Damian Hommel, who is a multiple Muay Thai champion. He's excellent.
Where does he live now?
He's still in Southern Oregon, I believe.
Oh, okay.
He was teaching at a college out there. He was a professor in geography. And yeah, very, 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 very skilled in a lot of different ways. But he's a Muay Thai kickboxing instructor, and I've worked with him for a lot of years as well. But yeah, it's that awareness of being able to figure out what works for you and working with different bodies and different energy types. When I would train at these different like MMA gyms and stuff, you would spar with different people of different heights, different weights, different sizes, different skill levels. And what that allows you is to see how you reflect against that.
Yeah.
So there's kind of this knife being sharpened by the stone kind of analogy, whereas in isolation, you can train as much as you want, but there's only so much you're going to know about yourself by training with yourself or only like one person. So like if you train with just one person, you know their tricks, you know their energy, and you only know your energy so much as far as you can relate it against to that level of exposure. But if you have had the opportunity to train with a multitude of different people, different skill levels and everything, it helps you really get hyper aware of your personal skill and development, because you can see how it works. Yours goes up against somebody else's, and it's really helpful. It really is. I could not recommend it enough to train with as many people as you can, because it'll allow you that opportunity to see how this stuff works, you know, as you have the awareness of it. And obviously it takes time to develop that level of sense of competency with something. And there are certain black and white things.
This works, this doesn't.
Right. There's things that will, like, this is the correct energy for this. Like, and maybe it's not the right time to use it, and that's why it's not working. So there are things that will have that delineation, but it's knowing how to put the pieces together. It all comes down to timing, angle, range.
Man, the subtleties of error correction. Like during a single class where, you know, I might have been training something a certain way at home for weeks, and then as soon as you show up in class with it and it just isn't working despite really following the directions, and it's not until you have that contact sensitivity with your classmates that you're like, oh, this is what it needs to be, and now I can take that home with me and take it to train with other people and strengthen your technique.
And
round it out.
Exactly. And it's finding that reference point for yourself. And that's ultimately what martial arts comes down to. And what I've always really appreciated and valued about it is the only opposition or the only opponent that you have in this life is you. It's about eradication of ego. The first thing I learned when I started on this pathway is that you're not important. Like your ego gets checked immediately. You think you're tough, you walk into a class, you get round kicked in the face with that person like not even breaking a sweat. You're like, oh, I really know nothing. You know, and so you have to come with a lot of humility. You have to show up with this idea of like, the best teachers will always be students. Meaning like you're never going to get to a point if you're working with someone who's like, I've arrived, I don't need to learn anything else. I don't want to be exposed to anything new. I already figured it out.
Seize him.
It's you're basically cooked at that point. So it's like you're not gonna continue to grow. You're not gonna continue to evolve. The people who are the most advanced are the ones that always remain curious. And they don't know what everybody knows. And that's the thing Bruce Lee was very noted for, was that he would expose his kung fu. He's like, show me your stuff. And he would work with somebody and he would find something that somebody did that was better than something he did. And he's like, great, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to take that because that beat my thing. And now that's part of my arsenal.
And that's a true artistic process too.
That's why it's an art, you know, martial art. It's a skill in and of itself. There's a martial skill, but the artistry of it is that wisdom to recognize this kind of interplay when you're dancing with somebody, like, oh, that step was superior to my step. So now I'm going to shift my step to mimic that because that was faster, sharper, more effective.
Well, also making it yours.
Right. Because there's an amalgamation of all the different skills and training and everything that you're doing. Ultimately, everyone is a mixed martial artist, even if you follow just one discipline. Because if you look at like Wing Chun, for example, there's so many different lineages in the system that depending on who you follow, which branch of the tree you go off of, you're going to have a completely different color and characteristic of it, even though it's the same martial art. And then you have different martial artists that are within that have their own color, that have their own energy of it. And you can feel it. There's like an imprint on it. And so it's like because of our school, have Stephen Joffe's imprint on our style, but it is still ours as well. And then we've been exposed to different people in our lineage and their style. And so we're definitely impacted or influenced, I'd say. But as he says, like, I can show you my kung fu, but you have to find your kung fu.
Yeah.
It's just got the chills on that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's a moment of self-discovery, really. And that's ultimately what we're here for. And we're just doing it in a really kick-ass
way.
Yeah.
I think that's what really steered me. I didn't know I was looking for it in this way. Low battery.
I was running low battery, or you're low?
Mine's low battery.
Ah, cool.
Just saw the red out of the corner of my eye.
That's nice.
Let's see. And then do we have the other?
No, you don't have to. It's also going to be faster to upload that way too.
Yeah.
Wires.
All right. 3, 2, 1. I think when I was first starting my journey, I was in school and all my friends around me were doing sports, team sports. And I didn't really gravitate with any of them. And I wanted something that I didn't have to deal there. I didn't feel like dealing with all the personalities on the team, but I still wanted to be active and get in shape and discipline myself in a way that felt meaningful. And martial arts just really struck me as a way for me to participate in an activity that was of physical discipline. It resonated with how I wanted to develop myself, but it was really just me against me.
Right. I think that there's a misconception, especially in like mixed martial arts, right? Because there's fighter culture.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a very clear
People
distinction.
that wear tap out shirts, that's who we're referring to.
There is a really clear distinction, I think, between a fighter and a martial artist. I refer to myself as the latter, even though I have fought competitively. And I've done that. I've done sport fighting thing because I was working and training and teaching out of an MMA gym, and people who were like currently in the UFC were underneath our like tutelage and stuff. So there was like this need to like kind of prove what you're teaching. I've always felt that way in general. Like I've taken marketing classes from people who've never run a marketing campaign. Ooh. They just like, it's an upper level division course, 300 level marketing class. And the guy teaching it is a graduate teaching fellow who's only ever been in school. Oof. And I'm like, you've never really done this. Yeah. So like why should I trust? You've never built a business. Yeah. It's like, why would I listen to your thing? I would rather listen to somebody. That's why experience always surpasses education, so to speak. Is like, you can read as many books as you want. That's great. It's good to have those tools in your toolkit. However, have you tried it? Does it work? And like in our school, it's like, oh, that's pretty. That's great. But can you fight? Yeah. Like, does it actually apply? Can you apply it in the flow and timing? Does it actually, can you find it? Because it's all nice and well to have these drills, but if you can't find it in the flow, then there's no point. It's kind of worthless.
I even remember, after watching Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and they're doing, I think a lot of the styles in that movie are wushu based, right? And Shaolin based. Yep. And there are branches of those martial arts that are a bit more ceremonious and acrobatic, and they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But even as a young person, I was getting bullied a lot at the time, and I knew that I wanted something that was just clean and mean and effective that I could use.
That's why I love our school. Yeah. Everything is just so direct and to the point. There's not a lot of fluff. I mean, anything that what I would see externally criticized as fluff is the energetic stuff, which is obviously the lifeblood of what it is that we do. So it's interesting because you're thinking we're doing these breathing exercises where we're going shh, and people are like, "What the hell is that?"
What does that have to do with anything?
Yeah,
everything.
Yes, and so there's those aspects of it. But I remember I went into as a gag because I'd been training for like 15 years at this point, and I was in a Silvermine Subs in Boulder, and they had one of those little boxes where you could put your name and number in, and like, hey, free 30-minute martial arts private lesson at this school. And it's like, I can't remember the name of the school, but it's the one with like the little bonsai tree. Oh, and it's like,
It's not the one by King Super's grocery store, is it?
It might be. Anyway, I don't remember the name, so I'm not going to name names. But so it was like this little, it was like, put your name in this little jar and for a 30-minute thing. I'm just like, for a laugh, because I've been training for so many things. And also, I mean, to be fair, it was a little arrogant. Yeah. But I was like, okay, let's go see what they got. Right. So I put my name in there, and then I get a call from like Chad or something being like, hey, I saw you put your name down in the thing, scheduling your 30-minute session. Let's get you in there. What time works for you? So I went in like the next weekend, And this was a guy who was 2 belts away from the top of their belt system. I can't remember what it was. Let's say it's a red belt. Let's say it went like red, brown, black, just for kicks. I don't remember. But like on the wall, they have the belts, like the hierarchy of it, right? So he was the 2 away from the top level. So pretty senior.
Yeah.
Right. And he's teaching. And so I'm running through. He's like, okay, we're going to stand in a horse stance. I'm like, okay. He's like, okay, now we're going to do this motion. I'm like, okay. And he's like, oh yeah, that's really good. Have you trained before? I'm like, yeah, I have some experience. You know, I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, I'm not going to spill the beans, but I'm like, yeah, I'm not, you know, I have some background. He's like, oh yeah, I can tell. I'm like, okay, cool. Awesome. And so there was this motion where we're standing in this horse stance and he's like, okay, we're going to punch down like towards like the groin area. And then we're going to come back up with this brushing block. It's a very standard block where you kind of like brush your hand up like this. Right. And I asked him, well, why do you punch down first? He didn't know. He didn't have an answer for me. And I'm like, okay, you're upper echelon. You're the same kind of thing in the marketing class. It's like you're a 300 level graduate teacher, basically. Like you're not, you know, the professor. You're not the top. You don't have a black belt, but you've made 3/4 of the way through your school.
Yeah.
And this is a basic block form.
Yeah.
And you don't know why you punch down first. Like that's rough to me. That's kind of the same thing of like, you know, sit down, shut up, just do what I say, not, you know, not what I do kind of mentality of not having any sort of inquisition into like, what is this motion for outside of a form? And it's fine if you tell me, oh, it's just part of the form.
Yeah.
Because then you're saying like, okay, this has value outside of the form, but then you should be able to show me where where would this be applied?
Yeah.
Because in any form that you do, it's an encapsulation of all the different hand movements. And so you're not going to find it in that the form isn't fighting. Right. But these were just basic blocks. And I'm like, what am I blocking? What strike would this work against? And I'm like, I couldn't think of a strike where that particular hand motion would have an impact, which is why I asked.
Yeah.
And he couldn't answer me. And I'm like, okay.
I think we're done here.
I think we're done. Yeah. You know, so I like, you know, was very polite and just finished out the free training session. Then I was just rolling my eyes as I left. But there's so many schools like that where people just follow a kind of a rote memorization. Well, they'll do a bunch of cool stuff like backflips and pole, you know, like not pole,
like bow staff,
bow staff, like spinning stuff, and it's like it looks really nice, and it's really cool looking.
When are you going to be caught on the street with a bow staff, Donatello?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it just makes me always question, like, how or where do you think this is going to apply?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like a lot of the times when you're taking like quote unquote self-defense courses or seeing those things, which is such a misnomer. And anytime that I've taught those types of classes. Yeah. I've always
like
said that
super practical, situational.
Right. And I've always had that disclaimer because I said like, even though this is quote unquote self-defense, that's such a misnomer because unless you're training this every single day for 20 years, this isn't probably going to work. And I might still like go to get out of my car and there's a gun pressed to my temple. And all of my years of training isn't going to help me in that scenario.
True.
So there's certain things where you have to be very cognizant and just aware of the reality of the situation. And if you find yourself in this situation and you've trained it a little bit, this could definitely work. Yeah. This is really effective. And so I always put it within that context. And there's a lot of things too about just like, don't carry yourself like a victim is a huge one.
Right.
You know, because people who are looking to prey on other people, which is everyone's fear from like a self-defense thing is like, oh my God, I don't want to be accosted in the street. I don't want to be like walking home and have somebody jump me.
The dark alley scenario.
Right. So it's like that type of scenario, which is very rare. I'm also 6'1", 230 pounds, trained. Like I don't look like a weak target.
No, you don't project victim.
Right. So I'm like, I also am aware of that as well. Like I'm not 100-pound woman. So I don't look that way. But what I've also seen is people are going to look for the ones that aren't going to put up a fight, that aren't going to do it. They just want whatever they want. They want their money. If they want whatever, they just like, that's the thing. That's what the aggression is coming towards for the majority of the instances. And so if you carry yourself with a sense of self-assurity and like, don't fuck with me vibes, like you're probably not going to be.
That's a huge part of the self-defense is carrying an energy,
is how you present and like how you're showing out. Because if you're not doing that, then you're creating, you're putting yourself as a target. because you're always, people who are in that type of predatory mindset are looking for the weak link.
Prey.
They're looking for the prey. So if you are not presenting that way, there's a good chance they're going to look over you because they're like, that looks like a fight. I don't want that. And so they're going to go to the next thing. And then if you present strong and they still confront it, now you have some skill to back it up.
Right.
Then it's great. You know, you can use those things in application, but again, it requires training. It tries like all consistent things. So I'm like, if you're not training this stuff, don't be falsely confident either.
Right.
Because I've seen that too. I've seen people train people like, this will save your life. And I'm like, they will murder you if you try to do that. Like, like that's not going to work. It's all cute. It's all cutesy stuff, you know, like it's not going to actually be, it's not going to apply. And it gives people a false sense of confidence. And I don't ever want to instill people with a false sense of confidence. I want to instill them with legitimate confidence that if they were to find themselves in a situation, regardless of size, regardless of anything, this will work if you find yourself in this exact situation.
Yeah. I think in order to make your practice and your training actually work for you, it does require a very well-rounded approach to embodying the martial arts that you're practicing. Like I remember when I've told you about this, when I took that silat class, Indonesian silat, pencat silat is a wonderful badass art. It's very quick. A lot of it's knife-based, not all, but there's striking and grappling. And if you're trained in it, if anybody's ever seen the movie The Raid, that's awesome demonstration of martial arts. But I remember training in this class, and you know, it was fun, but pretty much everybody I sparred with they knew the technique, but they were shrimps.
Right.
You know,
so if you were to actually apply any force, if you were to apply any legitimate force, it would crumble.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't condition outside of the technique training.
I've seen so much of that, and there's a term which I love, which is bullshito.
Yeah.
Which people use to like coin martial arts that are just complete bullshit. There's a lot of those types of schools where you'll see somebody demoing something. I'm like, dude, you couldn't run for half a block. Like, what are you doing? Like,
I mean, that's, you know, you see a lot of, I'm going to throw some shade right now, but you see a lot of neckbeards take up karate or something like that, you know, and they're not actually living the art.
Right.
You know, they're not
a conditioning of it.
Yeah.
There's this one guy who's trending on like Instagram and TikTok right now. He's like this white kid who's trained in Shaolin for like the last, I want to say like 8 years or something like that. Like in Shaolin, like in China.
He went to China.
Yeah. So he's like, he has all this video footage of him being like beaten with sticks, like holding like buckets of water and like
the real
balancing on
Mulan deal.
Yeah.
It's badass.
Like balancing on like one foot on a pillar and having this Chinese guy just like correct his form.
Like punching stone.
Yeah, 100%. It's like along those lines. And like, that's it.
Not projecting victim, that's for sure.
That like right. Like that type of training, like, okay, so you want to be strong and conditioned and be able to know what this feels like to take, and like that's a great quote from Mike Tyson, right? It's like everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
It's like everyone thinks like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then they get clocked and you're like, everything goes out the window.
Yeah.
You know, and so a lot of the training that I used to do when I was fighting competitively was to put yourself in that state to simulate you're exhausted, you're in the corner, you have no energy, and you still have 3 more rounds. 5-minute rounds. You know, like in any person who's ever fought in the ring, it is completely different than any sparring session you've ever had. Like you think you're tired doing bag work? Like, oh my God. Like ring, like
you're just jello,
dude. It's the number one killer of fighters is like people will get tired, they drop their hands, they get clocked. It's the thing is you get gassed, and so conditioning is huge, huge, because it's like people don't understand that the average street fight lasts 7 seconds, so it doesn't take a lot of time in general, unless you're trained, and then it's probably going to take a lot longer. But when you're doing sport fighting, that's a level of cardiovascular and endurance training that the majority of people have no knowledge of, and they do it one time and they're like vomiting into a corner because it's so intensive. And so the way that we would train our fighters and the way that we would train at the gym, it's very common. You do this like round robin type of training where the person who's getting ready for the fight you're doing usually like 2-minute rounds, just kind of as in preparation. And every 2 minutes you get a minute off, and then a fresh guy comes in.
Oh so you have a minute is nothing.
And so you have literally a line of professionally trained fighters, like waiting for recess, right? They're just like in a line in the corner of your opponent's corner. And every time the bell goes off, you go to sit down, a fresh guy comes in. And you do that for like 5 to 8 rounds.
Oh my God.
And then just back to back to back to back to back to back to back. And you're just conditioning
It's like
yourself.
Superhero training.
100%. Because if you can handle that, if you can find the angles and the timing and the ranging and all that stuff, when you're just utterly gassed.
I mean, that's like real warrior training.
Yeah.
You know, it's not for sport. You're actually trying to find the limits of your spirit and push them. And like the body's one thing, but getting emotionally worn down by getting hit in the face again and again, or you get, you know, hit with a Muay Thai round kick at the right side of the knee that just makes you crippled.
Yeah, or that insta Charlie horse when people catch you in your quad, like when you're not flexing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Get a knee there. It's just like, oh man. Yeah, it takes you down. But I also did this one interesting thing during it was like a men's group type of experience. And we all went to this dojo, and this teacher, I can't remember his name, was going through all of these pushing your limits type of scenarios and really making you come to grips with these types of things.
And getting vulnerable.
Yeah, putting yourself into a vulnerable situation. And it was interesting because he pressured a lot of 3 different areas of vulnerability. And so the first one was this technique, they called it the back off drill. And it was just presenting with presence and not physicality. And so imagining that you have somebody who you love that you're protecting and is standing behind you, and there's a threat coming towards you, and you can't hit them, you can't do anything, all you can say is back off. And the person who's coming towards you keeps advancing until they believe you. And so you have to dig deep into the core of your inner warrior
plexus.
Yeah, and just really present with just saying back off.
Yeah.
And as soon as they feel you, they start to back off, and you keep going until they go back all the way. But if they don't feel you, they keep coming at you, and they're saying horrific shit. Like the idea is like to present as a legitimate threat.
Right.
And you're believing and trusting that you're coming up with a concept of whoever's standing behind you, if it's your little sister, if it's your mom, if it's your partner or whatever, somebody that you perceive as like protecting, like you need to protect. And it was really impactful.
Yeah.
So that's one. That was one of them. And then the second one was physical, where somebody was holding up one of those body shield pads. And I think it was for 10 minutes where the timer started and you had to just keep going. You couldn't stop. Imagine if somebody was coming at you to kill you and you had to keep going and just keep going and keep going. And 10 minutes is, if anyone's ever fought in the ring or fought in the bag, you have to take a break to breathe. You have to take a break to set back, whatever. And you weren't allowed that.
Yeah.
You had to keep going. And what the conditioning or the mindset of that training drill is you always have something more to give.
Yeah.
Is that everyone thinks, oh, I'm tapped out. Are you still breathing? Can you still blink? Can you raise your arm at all? You still have something.
Yeah.
And he was telling the story about, because he would do these sessions for different groups of people. And he had this one woman who was probably like in her 60s, and she was like on the ground, and she was like just with her like index finger, just like raising up, hitting the pad. She had like almost nothing left.
Yeah.
But she was giving everything. Everything. And so the adage being was like, you always have something more to give. You always have more to give. And it's a mental drill. It's like a heart drill.
Yeah.
It's this idea of, oh yeah, you're tired. In my background of training, I would use wall sits for this, because your quads are way more developed than you think you are.
Right.
And you're going to feel the lactic acid burn up and everything. And it's going to be really uncomfortable, but you could hold that literally physiologically for over 5 minutes. No problem. People bail after 45 seconds.
Yeah, totally.
And so I use that as a kind of a gauge to see where people are at mentally.
Yeah.
How hard will you push yourself? Because you can go a lot longer and a lot further and a lot harder than you think you can. It's just these self-perpetuated, self-emplaced limitation beliefs that people hold and carry with themselves. And so I use the wall sit as a really good analogy for that. But this person uses 10 minutes of going ballistic on a pad as if someone was trying to kill you.
Right.
Or they're going to kill the person behind you.
which is
like
unacceptable.
Which is even worse, right? In a lot of those situations, it's like you'll have a hero's like, kill me, I don't care, but like, oh, we're gonna kill your lover, we're gonna kill your partner, we're gonna kill your sister, we're gonna kill your mother, whatever. And like, if you're protecting that and that person's life is on it, like people will go so much further.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so it's like that mindset of like, okay, put yourself in that position. What would you do?
Yeah.
And like, this is like, there is a cutoff, right? There's like, you put it at 10 minutes because we're like, we're not going to go for an hour,
right?
You know, but in reality,
who knows?
It could be.
And I mean, why else are you doing martial arts? Why else are you training?
There's so many different reasons to train personally. There's a lot of reasons why people come to it. But I think ultimately for myself, and I'd love to hear your answer to this too, but ultimately for myself, it is about knowing thyself. It's about knowing my limitations, knowing those, confronting those dark shadows of myself, and having a good look at it, and then not having it be something that's holding me back. That I have an intimate relationship with my shadow, so I don't have to be afraid of it.
Right.
One of the things that I've convinced so many people like who want to learn how to fight, I'm like, have you ever been punched in the face? They go like, no. I'm like, well, we're gonna get there.
Let's get that out of the way.
We're gonna get there. Yeah. And like safely, we'll wear 16-ounce gloves, but I'm gonna show you what it's like to get clocked at like 80%. So that way you don't have to be walking around with the fear of getting clocked.
Yeah.
At 80%. You know what I mean?
That makes a difference, man. I love that answer. Confronting the shadow. I'm also well acquainted with my shadow, and I love how martial arts brings it out of me, brings it out of the people around me. So we're facing it together within a container of a class. And I think just as important, it reveals with dedication and devotion your potential. You know, you get a taste of, oh, I actually have way more capacity for stress, for exertion, for mastery of self, way more than I ever anticipated. And it's also awesome. This is why you need to seek out a proper teacher and a good school, is because you see aspects of what your potential could be. You know, I remember when Sifu found inspired. Me. Totally.
You have to feel inspired. Otherwise, like, why are you training? Why are you training with that person if you don't like what you see? Yeah. Like, you have to see a model of something of like is aspirational that you can be like, oh, if I could get to a percentage of that, that would be awesome. I would love to be able to do that.
Dude, when Sifu found me, I felt like Thomas Anderson before he was Neo meeting Morpheus for the first time.
Yeah.
And like your life is different after that because you've seen more than you've ever seen before. And you're just, you know, this stranger is just maybe asking you a couple of really potent questions that get under your skin and make you question your capacity or your potential or
your reality.
Yeah.
You know, like I think a lot of people are living under a false reality. A lot of those self-imposed limitations are a false reality that you're thinking like, oh, this is real. I'm like, no, it's not. That is a choice. You're choosing to feel that way. You're choosing to look at that. And maybe it's underneath a lot of traumatic stuff that you have to unpack and work with, which is a lot of psychological training that happens by proxy of training.
Yeah.
But you have to really account for that. Coming back, because I realized I didn't say the third thing in that little demo.
Oh, yeah.
Is he choked people out.
Ooh.
It was optional. You didn't have to do it. It wasn't required to complete.
But you had to sign a waiver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But the idea was, and if you've never been put into like a rear naked chokehold before, where they're cutting off the blood in the carotid to like on the neck, people think it's the windpipe. It's not the windpipe. I'm not pulling back. It's cutting off blood flow to the brain on the sides. It's the cinching kind of like clamping action, clamping around the neck. It's not pulling back on the throat so that it's not getting air.
Oh, it's about the sides of the trachea.
Yeah, it's blood flow to the brain. It's not air to the lungs.
I didn't know that. Fascinating.
Yeah. That's why you go unconscious in 8 seconds. Or you can. If you have elevated heart rate, it's about 8 seconds. It takes for you to pass out. If you don't get that, because you need blood to the brain.
Yeah.
And oxygen too. I mean, oxygen is definitely part of it, but that's the thing that makes you pass out. And so the offering was to have somebody put you into a rear naked chokehold that you couldn't get out of and to go unconscious. Wow. And so again, it's like the same thing where like getting punched in the face, right? People are terrified.
Oh yeah.
Terrified of that. You know, it's one of my biggest fears is death, like the cessation of like everything just stops. Like, I'm not quite sure what happens after that point. I'm terrified of that eventuality, you know, but it's like I have to deal with that internally for myself. And this was an opportunity to kind of step up to a pseudo version of that, of like, you are on death's door.
Yeah.
someone has gotten you to a point where you're gonna die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like forcing people to confront their mortality.
Yeah.
So it's like, 1, just using your voice and presence. 2, physically go till you ever and learn that you actually have more to give. And 3, this is what this is. This is what this is for.
Yeah.
Because this is the reality of like within seconds you could be gone.
What a brilliant series of threshold tests.
Right?
It's beautiful, actually.
Man, I loved it.
I mean, my life changed after I got punched in the face for the first time.
Yeah.
Like it's different when you get punched within a container of a class with a glove. That's one thing.
Sure.
You know, I highly recommend everybody who's interested in this conversation whatsoever, like put themselves in that container to recognize that you're not made of glass. Definitely.
Yep.
And then actually, which I don't recommend, actually getting hit cold cocked, like bare naked knuckles, that's a life-changing experience in and of itself. I mean,
yeah, it changes. It's especially if all you've ever done is do pad work and gloves. It's different.
Yeah.
It feels different.
Yeah.
It rocks you different. Like people said, like, oh, I've been hit hard. I'm like, I know, I get it. And it's different.
Yeah.
Totally different. We used to do this thing called gypsy boxing. It's very much inspired by Snatch. And it was on Thursdays at this MMA gym at 7 p.m. We'd lock the doors, so it's not open to the public. It was very much like you had to be part of the school, part of the clique. And we would go bare shin hand wraps. And we would go like 50%. So not 100%. We're not trying to murder each other. We know we don't want to get concussions, but we wanted a taste of the reality of this is what a bare shin on bare shin feels like. This is what, stings. Yeah. And you want to condition it. You know, that's the idea. Like, this is what the real thing is. If you were to kick someone on the street, this is the reality, right? And so we would go like 50% bare shin and then hand wraps to protect the knuckle, but it's pretty much just brutal. It's just bare knuckle. You're protecting your wrist at that point. It's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And we would all leave with like pseudo headaches. But it was this again, that kind of like threshold test of like, this is what this really is.
Yeah.
Because when you have big poofy gloves on, you can block a lot of stuff, but you can't
forget the reality of what you're training for.
And also like how a hand would slip through a guard. Your guard is so much tighter when you're bare knuckle.
Yeah. Versus
like gloves or temples.
Yeah.
You know, bare knuckle is like you're keeping that tight to the face.
Yep.
Otherwise that'll slip through so many different things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just a different perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, you know, so Ian and I are both in our training progression. We're on a path, and I wanted to ask you what your goals are for, let's say, like the next, you know, couple of months, 2 to 3 months in training in martial arts, fitness,
for sure. So fitness wise, I've been sitting around like 220 to 230 for about a year. And I want to get down to 205, 12 to 15% body fat. That's my goal from like a physiological perspective. I want to be healthy, lower body fat, less weight so my joints can function. And I used to fight at like 175.
Okay. Lean and mean for you.
Way too lean.
Yeah.
I'd walk around at 185, still very light for me because I was competitive. So I wanted to be lighter.
Yeah.
My body likes muscle. My body likes mass, I should say. I look at a sandwich, I gain 5 pounds, you know, or I lift for 2 weeks and my body starts to flush out with muscle. My body likes mass. And so I also know that I have this like Nordic, Celtic, strong, carry my house on my back type of genetics. And so I want to utilize it also because I know how hard it is for people to put on muscle. And I'm like, comes naturally for me.
Yeah. And
so I also don't want to just go back to being really skinny, like back to being light. Yeah. I should say I wasn't never really skinny. But I don't want to go back to being too light. I want to have some mass, like get that sweet spot of really dense muscle. Yeah. But being on the more lean side, so looking like jacked, but at the same time, like I like to eat tacos. Yeah, you know, that's my ultimate goal from like a fitness perspective. And I think around 205 is a good number for that. And I'm close, so I'm about 25 pounds away from that, and so I'm very, very close to that. And then my primary goal with my martial arts training specifically is I want to become a Sifu officially in Wing Chun. I know a lot. I've been exposed to the entire system. My practice is getting more diligent. I took a couple of years off, like we were talking about, like have you ever taken time off? Like definitely. And so reinvigorating that fire to come back into the discipline of the daily practice. with that, and then eventually being a full-fledged Sifu in it, so that way I can teach. Part of what is a prerequisite for being a Sifu is you have to have students. You're not a Sifu if you don't have students. You're just a person who practices it.
Yeah.
So it's like it's implied that you will have students if you want to become a Sifu in Wing Chun, and that's my goal. And so there's a lot of things that I need to do still to be able to check that off. And so I'm working with our teacher to get to that point. And then I want to continue to train. I want to keep going and training. I'd love to go train with Philip Bayer as well, like while he's still here. I'd love to get that. I've trained with people in Hong Kong. I've trained with people, like a lot of people in the lineage. I've trained with Michael Street, our teacher's teacher. Like I've been exposed to a lot of different excellent high level Wing Chun, and I would love to continue to do that. I'm not saying that I should only train out of one lineage. Like I want to be exposed to all of it, again, for the same reason of understanding how my Kung Fu relates to it. So I can really get a sense of who I am and what my Kung Fu is. But ultimately I want to teach. So that's kind of like, it's probably going to be more than the next couple months. My goal is to, get there by this time next year. I'd like to be at that point. I feel like I'm close. Again, it's at this point, it's up to me. It's my practice and dedication to it, to like really hone it. And it's like what do they say? 10,000 hours, towards mastery, towards something. And so I'm just like, I don't know, halfway through that part.
Yeah. You're on your path, man. Yeah. Great answer.
Yeah. How about yourself?
I would love to put on lean muscle mass, at least like between 7 to 9, 10 pounds would be awesome. And then I want to develop a more regular meditation and Qigong practice.
Oh, that's another thing.
Yeah. Right. Sure. It's hard to forget it's hard to remember the value of circulating chi and life force to replenish yourself in between the physical training sessions, right?
It's so easy, I would say, 'cause it's so easy to forget it, or so easy to walk over it. Right. And this is where I would challenge a lot of people in a lot of ways, because a lot of people think training is hard. No, absolutely not. I would go lift. I would do forms. I would do roll all day doing chi sao. I would be banging on the wooden dummy. I would do that every day, no problem. The consistency with practice in that is not challenging. Challenge for me is mobility training, stretching, spending the time doing like decompression therapy, spending the time in seated meditation and doing the inner alchemy work. Yeah. Like that's what I avoid, like the thing that's challenging. It's passive to a certain degree. You're actively you're being present, but for the most part, I'm not doing a handstand push-up. Right.
You're not exerting yourself
I'm not doing
physically.
Burpees. You know what I mean? But it's funny because I would rather do 30 burpees than a 5-minute meditation.
So interesting. I know. I recognize that in order for me to progress to the point where I can really start downloading the teachings and the drills and the forms that we're doing, it's like Sifu said yesterday, you need a certain degree of meditation practice in order to expand your consciousness enough to intake new training and to integrate it in the body.
You need a place to house it. Yeah. And I think one of the things that's becoming ever more present for me, and this is something that I've heard intrinsically on pretty much every spiritual path, that I know people who practice, who are in like deep lineages and doing different things on their spiritual progression, whether it's martial arts or other, is you are not doing the thing is doing you. Yeah. And so that's something that's becoming more and more relevant for myself, is I've externalized this thing as I am practicing Wing Chun.
Right.
And the reality is
what a frame shift.
I am showing up for Wing Chun to practice me, so to speak. It's this idea where I am opening myself up to the energy to dance with Wing Chun.
That's art.
That's the art of it.
That's the
art of it is you are now a vessel for that thing to play with that thing. Yeah. And you're opening yourself up for the wisdom of those spiritual teachings that are housed in the forms, that housed in the different aspects of the martial art. Beautiful thing that you are expressing. And so it's the same thing with meditation. People think like, oh, I have to do this thing and meditate. And like, it's a thing to do. It's an action. Right. It's not an action. It's not a state of doing. It's a state of being. Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people, myself included, like rally against or have a hard time doing is letting go of A, control,
Yeah.
and B, like this thing that you're thinking you're trying to progress and get better and achieve.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. It's like the opposite of Wu Wei.
Yeah. It's not
Whatever the opposite of that is, like an
Wei Wu.
egoic. Yeah, Wei Wu. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I definitely feel the need to slow down and be more receptive to the teachings in a new way. Because I'm in a different spot in our lineage than Ian is. My goal over the next 3 months is to really develop competence and confidence in the root forms of Wing Chun.
Sure.
You know, to really lock in, TikTok, the Dan Sao drills, Chum Q, and let's say the first half of Wooden Dummy, to really lock that in so that I can have a strong foundation to my house, to build upon in the months to come. But that would be my goal, is to train more privately with you, and so that I can show up in a new way when we're in our group lessons, or if I'm in a private lesson with Sifu, because Sifu, he's like grandmaster level almost. So when he teaches it's easy for it to just
right. And well, he's living from that perspective of letting the martial art work with him, and so he has, I don't know, he doesn't really have an agenda.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's more about the energy. He's always done that. I mean, to be fair, it's not like this is a new thing for him, but he's always let the energy be the driver of what's necessary. Like we show up for a lesson and we're training this thing, but the energy's not there. Yeah. And so he's like, oh, the energy's for this. This is actually what we need. So we're going to do this instead. And so I know that that's been a rub for some people in the past of like, I thought we were going to be training this and da-da-da-da-da. And it's really not the right thing. It's not what's really called for. And he's really skilled at being attuned to that energetic awareness of what is called for. And that's why I love and really respect and appreciate him as a teacher, is like, he won't give you necessarily what you want. He'll give you what you need. Yeah. And so if you're training with him, it's like that, you can trust in the fact that he's looking out for your overall progression and wellness in that way, with obviously projection in mind. Like I'm training with him to like become a Sifu, so we know that that's an objective, right? But there's a reality, and sometimes we just need to meditate. Like today is a Qigong day. This isn't a Wing Chun day. This is a Qigong day, with a full knowledge of really where we're headed with it. And it's not an isolation either. A lot of people think these things are separate, and they're all the same. Which is why it's interesting with mixed martial arts coming in, because the energy's there. Yeah. It's just a different way of expression. It's all language. You're saying the same thing, but you're expressing it differently using different terms. Yeah. 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 And meditation is definitely like the kung fu of the soul and the mind and the emotional body, and learning how to wield and navigate your own inner landscape in a way where you actually feel like you're at the center of it, instead of getting swept along in the currents of your thoughts and feelings. Yeah. It's in the answer, ironically, is to stop. Is people think like, oh, I need to try, I need to do all this thing, I need to be working harder. And the reality is, you need to take a pause and get comfortable in the state of being, because at the end of the day, that's the only time that we ever have is now. Yeah. And anything's only ever going to happen in the now. And when you're in the fight, this is one of the things I always used to say to people, like, oh, do you meditate? I'm like, yeah, I spar every day. Because when you're in the ring, bro, like, you are focused. You are not thinking about dinner. More present in your life. You're not thinking about dinner plans. You're not thinking about that weird text. You're not thinking about that, job interview. You're not thinking about anything except for the moment. You are in the moment. And especially the more you train, because you are just being perceptive to the energy that's there. And that's how you can dodge punches, and that's how you can move in space, because you are just aware of where the gaps are, and you're filling the void, and you're dancing in it. Yeah. You're very, very present. And so it's like an active meditation. And it's totally a meditative state. But that aspect of being present is really what is called for and required if you're ever going to progress in any martial art, or in life in general. That's why it's so analogous to life. And just as a life lesson, it's like really just getting like, this is what life is. We've missed the boat, so to speak, as humans, because we're called human beings, but we're really acting as human doings. And we've attached,
it's killing us,
especially in Western culture, especially in American culture, because we've attached our sense of self-worth to the amount that we do or that we earn or that we acquire. And it's like, if you're not grinding, if you're not hustling, if you're not like burning the candle at both ends, you're somehow less valuable.
Right.
And it couldn't be further from the truth. And as we were talking about yesterday, it's like the separation between water and fire mind. You know, like that's very fire mind. It's very linear. It's very progressive. It's very like, I need to get to this objective and I'm going to burn forward this direction, ironically burning fire. And then water mind, the state of just being, flowing, tides, what's relevant, what's needed, what's the amount of force that needs to be applied in this moment. What do I need to put my attention? And if you're dancing from that perspective, everything has this kind of neutrality to it, where there's not really like this pressure. It just is. There's not an imbued qualification on it. It's just a reality.
Yeah.
You know, and you get to choose how you want to show up and how you want to put the energy onto that.
Yeah. Yeah, that would it feels like an oxymoron, but I was about to say my mission is to be more what I would say is I feel a deep need to reside more in water mind.
You and me both. After the meditation yesterday that we had, the thing that's so stupid is that's always available.
Yeah.
It's like, it's especially where we live, you know, it's like that cup runneth over with opportunity. That waterfall is always going, and we just forget that we can always just go sit by it.
Well said.
You know, we can always go back to that well, and it's ever present. It's always there, and we forget it. We forget that we don't have that at our disposal as a resource. And when I came out of the smile down, the word that I said was full, and it was just like I felt so just open, present, and neutral.
Yeah.
Just like nothing was like overwhelming. My nervous system was very calm. Like I could do this every day. What am I doing?
Yeah.
You know, and it's something that I think everyone could benefit from, especially any person who's in any sort of practice, is like to remind ourselves like that's always there as an opportunity, and the full awareness, like if you are showing up, you're doing the work. You know, 70% of life is showing up, because if you don't ever show up, you don't play the game, you'll never get a win, you know, if you're living your life on the sidelines. So if you're showing up, you're practicing, because I think I struggle with this, is this idea of I feel like I'm not doing enough.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not practicing enough. I feel like in a constant state of like being in a deficit of like, wow, I've been doing this for 20 plus years. I'm still not there. What's wrong with me? You know, and a lot of self-judgment and criticism and, you know, all that. I'm my biggest, worst enemy, biggest critic. And I think that the reality and the reminder for myself, and I think is helpful for other people, is if you're doing anything towards that goal at all, it's like to have some patience and respect for yourself that you'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
You're working towards it. Like you're making effort. You're putting in effort. You're putting in time to be present.
You're letting it live you in this moment right here, right now.
Right. So it's like being there and doing the thing. Like you're doing it. You're doing the thing. You know, it's just regardless of how long. And that's a huge learning for me that I got really thankfully early on, about like 5 years into my training, was I was struggling to get my switch kick down in Muay Thai. It had the stutter step. It was like this little like double tap. It was like a pop pop, you know, because for whatever reason I had this like stutter in my switch, and it was annoying the shit out of me. And so when I hyper obsess about something like that, it will not be a problem. So for like a few months, I was like walking to school, like on campus, doing the switch kick.
That's awesome.
Until it just became so ingrained in me, I didn't even have to think about it. But I hyper obsessed about it to get it to that point. But the mindset that I had to shift out of that, like I figured it out. My switch kick's good. But what I had to figure out in that process was, are you going to stop tomorrow?
Right.
Like, why do I have to figure it out tomorrow?
Yeah.
Why do I have to figure it out in the next week?
Yeah, you're trying to get to a finish line?
Yeah, what are you going? Where are you running to? Where are you running to?
Yeah.
You know, and it helped me really become more patient with my practice, because I had this urgency in the sense of like, I need to get this now.
Which is a beautiful thing.
Sure.
You know, the drive of it.
The drive, yeah. But the drive is helpful to a certain extent, but it's kind of like, it's a different energetic vibration.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you're first starting out, if you're talking like a totem pole of hierarchy, it's much lower.
Yeah. It's not very sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and it's not the point.
Right.
So it's like, it's helpful to get you through,
but it's not a clean burning fuel for your practice.
Right. And really what I had to learn, and the lesson that I gained from that was, if I don't get this today, that's fine, dude.
Yeah.
What you're doing is you're practicing it. It will click. You've had enough times of things clicking, turning your shoulder, Tansao, like having this energy, this Lot Sajik Chung, like having this constant forward springing like energy. You have this awareness. Once you like, I don't feel it. Oh, now I feel it. It will click eventually. You show up to present yourself for it. The energy will find you. Again, are you going to quit tomorrow? Because if you're going to quit tomorrow because you're not getting your switch kicked down, you should probably question why you're doing this.
Yeah.
And then if the answer is no, you're not going to quit tomorrow, then who cares?
Yeah, just dig in.
Just keep going. And then eventually it will click. And it is frustrating. I
totally
will totally own that. It's hella frustrating. But the lesson that I learned from that, which is really helpful, and if people can get on that tip for themselves in whatever you're practicing, it doesn't matter. You want to write more, you want to lose weight, you want to put on muscle,
painter, you're speaker,
whatever. It still applies. If you're going to quit tomorrow, then you should probably question why you're doing it. If you don't figure it out. Otherwise, if you're presenting yourself, have patience and respect for yourself and recognizing, like, you're going to get there eventually. It will click in. One day it will happen.
And then a whole new journey begins after that click happens.
100%, which is why if you're ever going to be working towards being a master of anything, you will always be a student. Every single day you're showing up with that level of curiosity. Not probably the same as day one. It actually gets deeper.
Yeah.
Which is the more you know, the more you learn you don't know.
Yeah. Man, I want to remember that waterfall is always there to be observed.
Yeah.
And to anybody even remotely interested in martial arts, I sincerely pray that this conversation was inspiring and tantalizing for that part of yourself, so that you can show up in the world with that curiosity that Ian was talking about, so that the right teacher, the right school, and that could be plural, the right teachers in the right schools can find you.
And they'll present themselves at the right time.
And you'll feel it when
if you're looking, if you're asking in earnest, they'll present at the right time. When you
Yeah.
Excellent cast, my man.
Bringing it home.
You did it. Closing thoughts.
I'm really excited to continue doing this podcast in whatever format it wants to be in and whatever feels right to us, and to bring on some new guests here and there, and to just be inspired in a way that inspires our loyal audience.
Yeah. Loved it. Thank you.
Love you, man.
Love you too.
Love you guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Sweet.
We'll see you next time.